So let's talk about finishing techniques. So I usually like to start with what's the best thing you can do. And the best thing you can do is to spray all of your finishes. Spraying is just the best because it doesn't leave any stroke marks from brushes, any sort of roller marks. Spraying gives you the cleanest, flattest, smoothest look you can get. So what do you spray? Well, the first thing you do is you need to prep your surface. So everything's been glued together, let's say at this point. The cabinets is ready to go. The first thing we do is we sand it. So all of our surfaces get sanded, and I use a random orbital sander, a little handheld unit. They're 30 or 40 or 50 bucks depending upon what brand you get. So I start with a 120 grit sandpaper on my random orbital sander, and I concentrate in areas where there's an overlapping joint, and I go down the face of all my hardwood and all of my plywood components. Anywhere that's going to receive a finish, the paint or the stain, I sand. Okay, so all of that gets sanded at 120 grit. And then I go back over it again with 220 grit. So we're stepping up in number. We're going to a smoother sandpaper, and so everything gets, again, sanded in 220. And then what we want to do is we want to get all the sawdust or the sand and the residual dust from sanding out of our piece. Some carpenters really don't like to use compressed air to do that. I don't mind it, but you can take some compressed air and blow it all over out of your joints and seams. Some people complain that it drives the sawdust further into the pores. It's whatever, I'm fine with it. The next thing you can do is you take some very clean cloths or rags with some denatured alcohol, and then you basically wipe down the cabinet. And what it's gonna do is you're gonna take out as much of that sawdust we created from sanding out of the pores. It'll also take off any residual oils from your hands or your fingers that deposit themselves on the wood. And those oils in your hands, if you touch your face and you touch the wood, will prevent the finish from adhering well. So we want to get all of that off there. Once everything's been, now we've been sanded, we wiped it down, it's been cleaned, we're ready for our first application of primer. So if we're painting this, we need to start with a primer. The primer I like to use is called BIN 123, and it is a shellac-based primer. So shellac, it's basically an alcohol-borne, I think, finishing product that sprays really, really nicely. So you don't really need to thin it. You can put it right into a spray gun, and you can apply very even coats with a spray gun of that primer. I use an HVLP gun to do that, and that's sort of like this barrier to entry for a lot of people who are just getting into this is, should I get the spray gun and equipment and all that stuff, or should I just brush everything on or roll everything on? What I like to do is to at least spray on the primer, because we're talking about at least 1 or 2 coats of primer and then a couple coats of finish paint. So if you spray on all 4 of those coats of whatever they are, you're going to end up with a nice, clean, smooth finish. If you can spray on the 1 or 2 coats of primer, that's great. And then you brush on the final 2 coats of finish, that's fine. If you have to brush or roll on all 4 coats of both your primer and your finish paint, then you run into an area where you end up getting some goopy marks on it, some inconsistencies. So I would at least recommend the best way to do it is spray everything. If you can't spray everything, at least spray your primer and then sort of go from there. If you can't afford a spray gun, so the spray gun I have is a Fuji. It's a Mini Mite 3. The whole system, it's a turbine system. They're about 500 bucks. They're not cheap, okay? But if you're going to do a whole kitchen set, the whole kitchen cabinet set for your home, and you're doing 10 or 12 or 15 cabinets, I think it's worth it, because the amount you're saving on building the cabinets is probably worth at least renting one or borrowing one, but consider purchasing one of those. If not, you can always use a shaker can of some sort of primer-based paint, and you can spray on just using a shaker can. You may require several shaker cans, but for something like this, I was able to prime everything in a quart of that Bin shellac primer. It would have taken several shaker cans, but I would have had a good, clean, even result. It would have been better than brushing. So if we're going to then, so now that covers priming, spray on the shellac, if not spray on some other shaker can stuff. If I wanted to spray finish this cabinet and I didn't care about it matching anything, so the homeowner picked out Tricorn Black from Sherwin-Williams, so that there was an intention there to match other things in the room. But if I wanted just to basically paint this in any old spray finish, I would have chosen a lacquer. So lacquer, again, is like shellac. It goes into your HVLP gun and it sprays just awesome, just sprays great. Thins out, it levels out very evenly, and lacquer gives you a durable, hard candy coating finish. So lacquer usually comes in a tinted color, and if you get the right brand, it's like Valspar, you don't need to go over it with a clear coat. So it's a little different than painting your car, where you do a base coat and then clear coats. When you're lacquering a cabinet, usually that colored tinted coat has sort of a satin sheen to it, and it's good to go, and you don't need to go over it with a clear coat. So I would have, if this was for me and I wanted it black and I didn't pick Sherwin-Williams, I would have gone with a black lacquer in a satin sheen. You don't usually want to do semi-gloss. Satin is fine. Satin and eggshell are essentially the same thing. Flat won't work. Semi-gloss is too glossy. Stick with satin. You get a much better result. So I would have sprayed a lacquer. You have to buy those lacquers at specialty paint shops. You can't go get them at Lowe's or Home Depot. You have to go to a local specialty paint store that sells painting or finishing products to businesses. So they'll sell to, a lot of them will sell to consumers. I can walk in at our local one and just buy a gallon of lacquer and then put that in my gun, and I'm great. For those of you who want to integrate your cabinet, so they want to integrate this into the room, and they picked something that I can't get in a spray finish, that's Sherwin-Williams Tricorn Black. What we're going to do is we're going to get a high-end brushable cabinet paint. And the best one you could do from that, depending upon what brand you go with, for Sherwin-Williams, it's the Pro Classic. And this is a little quart of Pro Classic. It says right in big letters, Pro Classic. It's an enamel, so it's like nail polish. So it's a smooth enamel finishing paint. Again, I got this in satin, and this is what we painted our office cabinets with. And so what this does is what you can do is you can apply it with a roller. The method I use is I apply a light coat with a roller, and then within seconds, I take a dry brush, and then I go back and forth, and I I brush out the roller look. And what that does is it evens out the coat, and you may end up with some brush marks with the enamels. It won't be as bad as with regular, say, room paint. What you don't want to do is go to the paint store and just get regular old latex room wall paint. You don't want to do that. It's too goopy, it won't hold up, it won't level out, it won't flatten out, it'll leave too many brush marks, it won't harden like an enamel will. So, you paint it, 2 days later it's dry, you think it's not that bad looking, but then you put your books on it and your stuff, and then 6 months later you go to pull it off and it pulls half the paint off with it. Everything's sticking to the paint. Enamel paint won't do that. Lacquer won't do that. Regular wall latex paint will do that. If you end up making that mistake, you have to let it harden for weeks before you can put something else on it. That's referred to as blocking. Good high-quality cabinet paints like this Pro Classic enamel paint have very nice blocking characteristics to prevent things from adhering to objects you put on it. The other alternative to Sherwin-Williams Pro Classic would be Benjamin Moore Satin Impervo. I think Impervo is like sort of the product and satin is the finish, but anyway, Benjamin Moore sells it as Satin Impervo. And Satin Impervo is equivalent to the Pro Classic, and it's what we used in our first set of kitchen cabinets when we built those. Those were sprayed with a primer, and we brushed on that satin and pervo in white. The reason we did that is we had crown molding in the whole room and baseboard molding in the whole room, and we wanted it to all be one integrated color and seamless. And how are you going to do that with spraying HVLP lacquer everywhere? That's sort of when you want to make the break between, do I spray my standalone cabinet? If it's a standalone cabinet and you have the gun, yeah, go ahead and hit with a lacquer. If you want to integrate it into the room and all the crown molding, and spraying lacquer in your house isn't practical because it's not practical, then you use sort of a brush-on enamel paint. For this project, because we used tricorn, the homeowners wanted tricorn black, I could not get Satin Pro Classic or Pro Classic from Sherwin-Williams in tricorn. So we used this all-surface enamel that Sherwin-Williams recommended, and it is an acrylic enamel. It does have latex paint, so it's sort of a higher-end paint than the regular wall paint. It levels well. It's okay. It's not bad. We'll give it a couple more coats, see how it looks. I'm okay with it so far. But again, depending upon your color restrictions, you may be limited in products. If you have any questions about any of the finishing techniques you've seen here, and anything we've discussed, just leave a comment below, and I'll do my best to answer them. If we're talking about staining cabinets and not painting them, then you're looking at the same process up until you get to the primer. You don't prime it, you stain it. You stain it with a rag, or a brush, and you get your stain in there. You wipe it off, and then instead of hitting it with a painted lacquer, you hit it with a clear lacquer, and that's how you bond that in. Polyurethane's okay, but I would only use polyurethane if it's something I'm not going to touch a lot. So like an end table that's not going to get a lot of action. Cabinet doors, kitchen cabinet, office doors that you're touching a lot with your hands, use lacquer. I think it works better. It's harder. It's more of a candy coating. And definitely spray the first coat on. If you were to apply a stain and then you were to brush on a polyurethane, you're going to end up wiping some of that stain right out of the seams. So I always try to lock in the stain with it, spraying at least one coat of some clear shellac or lacquer, and then going over it with either polyurethane or more coats of lacquer. That's generally the process when you're talking stain stuff. So yeah, that's it. That's pretty much the extent of the finishing project. So over the next couple weeks, I'll go back and put some more paint on this. I'll finish up the shelves, and then we'll install this, and we'll do a whole little video on what that's like to install it. So I hope you found this 3-part video series helpful. And like I said, if you need more instruction, if you're looking to get a full understanding of how to design and build custom cabinets for your home, whether they're the built-ins or they're kitchen cabinets, check out the cabinetsfromscratch.com video course. I have a link below this video and in the comments where you can sign up and enroll to take the course, and you'll have access to all of the lessons immediately, and you can get started designing and planning your own cabinets, whether they're built-ins or kitchen cabinets. If you have any questions about anything you saw in the series, you can certainly leave a comment below, leave a question, and I try to answer them all. Definitely give me a thumbs up on the video and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.